Guys, see, Miami. I love me some Miami. Love me some Dwayne Wade. Been a fan of Jimmy Butler for like 4 years now. Wow. They're up 3-0. Let's talk about it.
I've never, ever seen anything quite like these Miami Heat. I've always respected Jimmy Butler. If you look at my channel, I have a long history.
Yeah, of course. To me, like, before he went to Miami, like, to me, he was always a top, like, 15 consensus player. Like, let's have that conversation. He's, like, top 7 to top 10 right now. Like, don't get it twisted.
Of praising this man. But number one, I didn't think he could sustain this level of unprecedented greatness for this long. And I damn sure didn't think a culture could be this strong in a star-driven league.
That's so true.
7 undrafted players. Their third best player injured. No all-stars. And 2 games away from the NBA Finals. We've never seen anything quite like this. Today's video is sponsored by DraftKings
Okay, let's
Sportsbook.
move.
The NBA playoffs is
No.
unfortunately coming to its conclusion.
No, don't want to get copyright. Okay.
Instead of 5-6 point lead. That's where it starts. That's the sign of a good man. If you can talk shit when it.
What was Grant Williams thinking? Like, what was he trash talking? Be like, oh yeah, I'm like that. I'm Grant Williams. You're like, what? Like, really? Like, Grant, what do you do?
Even score. Or talk shit when you're behind score. When you're ahead, it's easy to talk.
Very true.
In 1999, we seen something similar to this year's Miami Heat, but it wasn't quite this. The Knicks, as an 8th seed, they made it all the way to the NBA Finals, knocking off the first seeded Miami Heat, knocked off Reggie Miller's Pacers in the conference finals, and then they ran into a dynasty in the making with Duncan and Robinson, and their run unfortunately ended. What made their run so special is the fact they did the majority of their damage without an older, banged-up Patrick Ewing. In that special run to the finals, not only did they knock off the first seed, but they knocked off the player voted second in the MVP voting. Now, not to take away anything from that special New York run, but the NBA was a tad bit different back then.
That was like from 1999, I would like to say, until like 2007. That's when the East was at its weakest.
The NBA was in the midst of a 50-game lockout season.
That's true.
Kind of weird. 2, the first round was the first to 3 instead of 4. And 3, the NBA had just lost their best player, Michael Jordan. So,
yeah, like at that point, the East was like anyone's. Because if you look at the East now, you have the Knicks, the Cavs, the Sixers, Celtics, and most importantly, the Bucks, which got eliminated in the first round. I still don't know how that was probably the most impressive elimination by far. Because even if you look at Boston, Boston's more inconsistent, like really inconsistent. I think if Boston and Milwaukee would have faced, I think Milwaukee would have beat them. Now seeing that Miami's up 3-0 on Boston and might possibly even sweep them. But yeah, the East is just so much stronger now and has so much more talent compared to like 1999. It was really for the taking. I mean, like it was really anyone's ball game.
everything significantly opened up. What the Miami Heat are en route to do this year. Mind you, I know it's not over. ESPN still inexplicably underrates this team. I understand all that.
I still don't know how. I really don't. I don't know how you could possibly, after Miami stealing 2 at Boston, believe that Miami will lose the series. Because let's say hypothetically, you lose 2 games at your home court. Miami is undefeated in Miami. Let's say you take 1. You're down 3-1. So at best, you might win 1 in 6. You might win in 6. I mean, Miami might win in 6. But in worst case scenario, you're probably going to get swept, which seems most likely. But there's always a middle ground, so I like to say Miami in 5.
But what they're 2 games away from truly makes no sense. The Miami Heat in December They were 3 games below 500. The Miami Heat at the deadline, they were fighting not to be in the play-in, which they ultimately were. The Miami Heat, after being the first seed last year, dropped all the way to the 8th seed this year. The Miami Heat rely heavily on 4 undrafted players. The Miami Heat made no significant moves at the deadline. The Miami Heat made no significant offseason moves. The Miami Heat had a net rating with all teams not even close to making the playoffs this year. The Miami Heat were one of the worst teams off.
That's what I was saying though. Like, they were not good this regular season. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, they weren't good. So this is like a shocker to me. But they're still playing like that 1 seed they were last year.
All year. The Miami Heat are one of the smallest teams in the sport, so they got killed on the glass. The Miami Heat on paper have some of the worst contracts you can think of. The Miami Heat scored the least amount of total points this year. The Miami Heat lost their 3rd best player in the first game of the first round. And somehow their mantra is still 1, 2, 3. I made a video 3 years ago talking about how the Miami Heat were on one of the greatest, most unexpected runs in the history of the sport. And somehow this year, they're even outdoing that. The Knicks 24 years ago beat one player that was top 5 in the MVP voting en route to that NBA Finals. Not only is Miami en route to beating 2 players that was actually top 4 in...
Not only that, like, Boston and Milwaukee were like set in stone to meet each other in the conference finals. And not only that, they were favored, both of them, to win a title this year. Because if you look at my Milwaukee's roster, it was disgustingly deep. And if you look at Boston, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were finally figuring it out offensively. But now you look at their inconsistencies, and now you look at Milwaukee and how Mike Budenholzer just can't coach. Chris Middleton's knees gave out. Giannis got injured but missed 13 free throws in Game 5. There was a lot of variables. And, yeah, this is very impressive.
MVP voting and a player that won 2 out of the last 5 MVPs. But they're also quietly, very quietly, I don't hear anybody talking about this, avenging the last 2 seasons and making a fool out of anybody that questioned the legitimacy of their run 3 years ago. In 2020, in the second round, again, they took down the 1st seed in the conference and at that time, the current back-to-back MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. A lot of people, understandably so, questioned the validity of that run. Was it because they were in a bubble? Was it because they had 4 months off? Was it because Chris Middleton admitted he took 4 months off of basketball and didn't even touch a basketball? Was it because Milwaukee didn't have home court advantage? Nobody really quite knew. Even in the Eastern Conference Finals where they beat Boston, even Jason Tatum sounded like he questioned how valid were some of those performances in the bubble.
I ain't gonna say no names, but there was some people on the other team. I'm like, hold on, he don't normally play like that. Like, I'm like, he acting different in the bubble.
The year directly after making the NBA Finals, they met Milwaukee in the first round again.
That's an anomaly though, because if you really look at it, they had the shortest offseason. Jimmy got COVID, Bam was injured, Hero was injured, Duncan wasn't great. Like, that was just an anomaly of a year. Like, if you really look at it from like NBA perspective, just they got like what 100 days, probably less. Like, it was like 80 days. It was like the shortest offseason in NBA history. So if you really look at it, it's not surprising.
And got swept. Jimmy Butler played some of the worst basketball I've ever seen him play.
Yeah.
And that helped fuel the quote-unquote bubble fraud title that got placed on that organization. Last season, as a 1st seed against Boston at home in Game 7, they lost a very tight game. And you really can't call them fraud.
Yeah, at that point, that's where you're like, oh, the bubble is actually real. To me, when they went that far and they went to 7 with Boston, and Boston to me was better, and that's why they went to the finals. That's when I was like, yeah, it's wraps. The bubble wasn't a joke for Miami. Like, they deserved 100% to be in the bubble. Like, they proved that to me last year. It's proving a lot to a lot of people this year. But last year was really like, okay, yeah, these guys are for real.
Or anything like that for that specific loss. But again, a team they beat in quest for that finals appearance 3 years ago came back and avenged their loss. And now this season, They came back and they're currently chopping down the Giants in the most gritty, unexpected Miami Heat way possible. Different faces, different roles, yet they have the exact same denominator, Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
And not to mention, the two teams they're 2 games away from possibly beating were literally the 2 teams that were the favorites to win it all a month ago. I talked about it and raved about it like a month ago, but the legacy of playoff Jimmy has been padded even more. Since he's been in Miami, the player that has the most 40-point games in the playoffs is now Jimmy Butler. The player that has the most 35-plus point games is now Jimmy Butler. The player that has the best anticipation skills and is dead ass like Ed Reed with how he can telegraph passes and steal the ball and leads the league in steals with these last 3 years is definitely Jimmy Butler. The player that has the most 3-plus steals games is most definitely Jimmy Butler. The player with, by far, and this is no disrespect to the Miami Heat roster, but it's just the facts with talent, by far the most inferior roster, yet he has the most playoff wins amongst stars, is Jimmy Butler. One of the only players to have a 60% winning percentage since 2020. Mind you, he's the only one that doesn't have a championship. Man,
If you look at those names, Steph, great team. Anthony Davis, LeBron had a great team in 2020. Been on a roll, down 3-0 right now, but in the playoffs, they've been good. Jamal, Bubble Jamal, Devin Booker, they've had good playoff runs, been to the finals. Chris Middleton, Giannis won a chip. It's just Jimmy hasn't had you should build around Jimmy as your number one option to be a championship contender. But it's just, I don't think they've had enough. So that's why, like, the percentages may skew to the, like, oh, but he hasn't won a title. But the percentages are right in the form of, like, oh, he does bring you wins. He is a valuable player.
because he hasn't been on those rosters, is Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
Somebody commented under my tweet yesterday, and I have to bring it up because it was so facts. It's almost like Jimmy Butler injects that dog into anybody he runs with, and they match his energy. Against Milwaukee, where they took advantage of that golden opportunity, a team that was a subpar shooting team all regular season, they shot 45% from deep. Against Boston, where it's like they know they have to elevate their play. As a team, they're shooting 44% from deep, but their starting lineup, they're shooting 50% from deep. That's insane. Also, they're holding Boston, a team that relies way too heavily on how much they can outshoot you from deep, to 31% from downtown. Boston this year, they're a below 500 team when they shoot under 40% from deep, and they're 36-2 when they shoot at a 40% clip. So they rely heavily on how much they can outgun you. Also, and this is just like the most Kansas City Chiefs stat I've ever seen in my entire life. Shout out to Nick Wright for pointing this out. This Miami Heat team, this playoffs, they're 6-2, a 75% winning percentage when they trail by at least 10 points plus in these playoffs. The rest of the league is 14-59.
That's ridiculous.
That is insane.
That's really
and for
crazy.
anybody that pokes this man,
Patrick Star looking self, Judas, Grant Williams.
Butler. And I know it's competition. I don't really mean this. It's kind of just for the video. But can we please stop?
Like, Judy, shut up.
The player that the players voted as the best overall defender by The Athletic. Look at what he did to this man in Game 5.
Let him cook.
Like Michael Jordan said in that iconic Last Dance documentary. It was almost like he was foreseeing Jimmy Butler's career. It's cool to trash talk when you're up. Jimmy does it when he's 5-6 points down. Against Grant Williams, directly after Grant hit that big shot and decided to poke Jimmy Butler. He hit the majority of his game-sealing heroic buckets against Grant Williams and decided to trash talk when he was down 5 to 6 points. I don't know how far this team is going, but I've never seen a team quite...
If they win the championship this year, it will be the greatest championship ever won. This will be the greatest championship of all time. That's all I'm going to say. This will be the greatest championship of all time.
Like this. Kevin Love was picked up off the street. Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, and Max Strus, they're all undrafted, and they're huge contributors to this team. Eric Spoelstra was homegrown and home developed, and he's easily the best coach in the league, and he's outcoached every coach he's faced in these playoffs. And this team is down Tyler Hero and, for what it's worth, Victor Oladipo, and they're 2 games away from the finals. Respect, man, respect. If you guys like this video, Yeah,
that's going to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Miami's on a tear. Like I said, if they win this title, gonna be the greatest title of all time. By far. I don't care. You can say 3-1 comeback. You can say Dirks. You can say Hakeem's. But this is an 8th seed that took out 2 juggernauts in the Knicks. And possibly could take out Denver. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. And peace out.